G'day guys, this is Tyr and welcome back to another Fallout 76 build video. This particular one is going to be a little bit familiar to those of you that did watch my Thor PvP heavy weapons build video. Since this is the same character, I've just essentially changed his perks around to suit a more PvE min-max type of playstyle. This one is going to be all about how to get the most damage potential out of your heavy weapons and simultaneously being as tanky and hard to kill as humanly possible, at least towards PvE scenarios. And I mean it when I say that this build does not go down easy. A quick example of how tanky this guy is would be the background clip on screen right now. I am bloodied, below 20% health and absolutely just tanking both the melee hits and the eye laser shots from one of the most powerful enemies in the game, the imposter sheep squatch. Now if that clip doesn't have you intrigued, then I don't know what will. But stick around and I will walk you through every aspect of this build. Let's get into it. First up, as most of you know, I like to give them a little bit of a backstory for all of my builds, to give them a bit of character and set them apart from the regular builds that are here on YouTube. If you'd like to skip it, feel free to do so, there is a timestamp on screen right now. But anyway, this is Magnus, the Devastator. Magnus was a military man before the war. He was one of the few soldiers that was lucky enough to serve his country in the Battle of Anchorage against the communist threat. Magnus was one of the heavy weapon power armor infantry specialists that first took the winterized T-51B power armor suits for a test drive against the Red Menace. And while he fell head over heels in love with the raw power that this mechanized suit provided him, it did make him a little bit cocky and a bit of a showboater. He loved the pure power that power armor gave him. He felt like a super soldier, like he was on top of the world, and he answered to nobody. After each victory his ego only grew, until one battle, just after breaching one of the enemy-occupied compounds in Anchorage. After the enemy was defeated, Magnus was going through the usual routine of showboating and letting the world know just how great he was, when suddenly he accidentally discharged a few rounds of his weapon directly into the back of one of his squad mates. Luckily for the both of them, he was also in a suit of power armor. All of Magnus's behaviour previously, and now including this incident, he was deemed not to be fit for service. He has been hit with a dishonourable discharge from the army, and Magnus then returned to his home in Appalachia just a few days before the Battle of Anchorage was won and declared a decisive victory for the US military. Even though Magnus was not a part of this victory, he remained vigilant and joined a group called the Free States, because he knew that the threat of nuclear Armageddon was flying higher than ever before. And obviously that threat eventually did come. China and America went into nuclear battle against each other. Luckily for Magnus though, he did make a few friends with the Free States, and they did end up letting him into their bunkers, which obviously spared him a fate of death by nuclear fire. So that is the backstory of Magnus the Devastator. I love coming up with random stories for all my characters, and I hope you all enjoy it too. But yes, basically he was in the US Army and has extensive experience with power armor and heavy weapons, and after his discharge from the military he took shelter from the bombs with the Free States extremists for survival. So now that the intro and the backstory is done, let's get into the actual build. For this you will need a strength of 12, perception of 1, endurance of 6, charisma of 4, intelligence of 14, agility of 8, and luck of 11. Now to pull all of this off, I will have linked down for your convenience a link to this build in the Nukes and Dragons website. The same can be said for all of my previous builds now, I've gone back and edited that in. Alright, now into the build itself. I will remind you guys that this is a heavy gunner that uses power armor, and his sole purpose is to be as tanky as humanly possible towards PvE aspects of the game. If you want PvP tanking or a PvP power armor build, I've already done that, I'll link it in the top right. But yeah, for this we will want to be dealing as much damage as humanly possible, and for that we will need to take all 3 ranks of Heavy Gunner: Master, Regular, and Expert. And then filling up the last slot, we will be taking max rank of Blocker. This will ensure that we take absolutely almost no damage from all melee attacks. This is very useful for when we're fighting the Scorchbeast Queen or Imposter Sheep Squatch, or something like that that just deals massive melee damage. Obviously you could substitute this in for max rank of Locked and Loaded if you want to reload 30% faster, or even Bare Arms and Bandolier if the weight is a problem for you. But yeah, that's all up to personal preference for that last bit. I prefer Blocker. Next up, Perception. this one is just not really a worry for us. It is not something that is top of our list. Having high perception does not matter since we cannot really use VATS for heavy weapons. So with that being said, I've chosen to just take rank 1 of Refractor for a bit more energy resistance. It can't hurt. Also, nothing in here really affects this. I suppose you could have rank 1 of Concentrated Fire if you did want to use VATS, like if you have a Gatling gun or something like that. But aside from that, nothing really benefits us. In Endurance, we want to have rank 3 of Life Giver, rank 4 is not needed. We only use this just for that little bit of health regeneration, you know, that little glitch when you're at low health. When this gets fixed, we will obviously be replacing that with something else. I'm not exactly sure what it could be replaced with because I hear that that is getting fixed, but it could always just stay put anyway. 30 plus to your maximum health is pretty good. Additionally, we will want to be taking max rank of Fireproof to ensure that we take 45% less damage from all explosions and flame attacks. This is essential for when you're fighting the Scorch Beast Queen or any Scorch Beasts in general, so that their attacks basically do nothing to you. It's really worth it. Also, this is beneficial for us so that if we do accidentally attack ourselves with our explosive heavy weapons, then we will do reduced damage to ourselves. It's important. Moving on to Charisma, this has two little points of view that you could play as. When you're solo, you'll definitely want to fill it up with max rank of Lone Wanderer. Doing this will give you 20% less damage from all incoming sources, and you gain an insane 30% increase to your AP regen. This is massively important for this build, and it definitely adds to the tanky aspect. But for when we are on a team, we will want to be doing max rank of Tenderizer and Strange in Numbers. Also, I just realized that another viable replacement for Life Giver, if you don't want to use that when that does eventually get fixed, you could take those 3 points from Life Giver, move them to Charisma, and then put them into Tenderizer for a little bit more damage. But until then, I'm content with this setup. Moving on to Intelligence, this is where all the most important perks for the Power Armor playstyle come into play. This is a Bloodied, explosive, Power Armor build after all, so we definitely want to be taking Nerd Rage to gain a massive 20% damage increase while we are below 20% health. Additionally, we want to take Stabilized for a 40% armor penetration bonus with all of our heavy weapons. This is only active whilst you're in Power Armor, so that is key to this build. Finally, we want to be taking Demolition Expert. Obviously, if you don't have any explosive weapons, then this will not benefit you. That is 5 points you could use for something else. But for me, for getting the absolute most damage possible with this build, I have explosive weapons and then the explosive Demolition Expert perk tacked on. The only problems with weight I seem to have is with energy weapon ammo, so I have chosen to put on batteries included. Obviously this is because plasma cores, fusion cores, and Gauss minigun ammo weigh a absolute metric fuckton, so I feel this is needed. You may not have the same weight problems I do. If you don't, then I highly recommend that you put on Power User. This will definitely increase the duration that your fusion cores last, which is obviously important for Power Armor. It powers your Power Armor. But yes, this is a Bloodied, explosive, heavy weapons Power Armor build after all. If you don't want Bloodied, and if you don't want explosive, then those two perks can be substituted for something else, at your discretion. Moving on to Agility, we have max rank of Adrenaline. I am aware that it is currently not working, but that is going to be fixed very soon. This is incredibly useful for absolutely min-maxing our damage potential. It's an extra 60% damage when we get a few kills, so it's nothing to pass up. Additionally, to add to our tanking aspect, we definitely want Dodgy. This will reduce all incoming damage by an additional 30% on top of everything else we've got already stacking here. So yeah, it's definitely useful. Also, the action point drain, don't worry about it. It's fine with Power Armor. You're not really using it for anything besides jumping or jetpacking if that's what you have on your Power Armor. And no, to add to our tanking aspect, we cannot use Moving Target and we cannot use Evasive. They do not work in Power Armor, just to answer any questions before they come up. Moving on to Luck, we have max rank of Bloody Mess. This is absolutely essential to absolutely min-max our damage output with this build. 15% extra damage is nothing to pass up again. It's absolutely needed. Then we will also be taking max rank of One Gun Army. This is absolutely amazing for this build when we are using weapons like the Gatling Plasma, Gatling Laser, Minigun, LMGs, 50 cals, anything. Having a 12% chance to stagger and 12% chance to cripple a limb is absolutely amazing. You do not want to pass up this perk if you're going to be using my build. Additionally, this one is a little bit frowned upon. Ricochet. We will be taking max rank of Ricochet, and I'll show you just why in just a moment, but This perk is incredibly looked over and looked past. People don't realize how great this perk actually is. It gains an 18% chance to deflect some of the enemy's ranged damage. Now what this basically means is, you know how serendipity does not work for power armor? This is basically a serendipity for all ranged weapons. Not only does it deflect the damage back, it completely negates it towards you. So that's basically an 18% chance to have no damage dealt to you at all whatsoever, and you don't even have to be below 30% health for it to become active. So yeah, it's incredibly useful for when you're fighting things like the Scorchbeast Queen or even the Imposter Sheepsquatch, as it does work with its head beam laser. And lastly, with all builds, we definitely need Sarge genes so that we can keep all of our chosen mutations for the build. Speaking of mutations, let's get into that. So that was the build. I will mention it again that I have linked down in the description all of the perk cards in the Nukes and Dragons website. It'll help you choose what perk cards to take at what level. It's a great website, make sure to use it. But moving on to the mutations, we'll want to take the following. Adrenal Reaction, this is absolutely essential for this build. Do not worry about the negatives, it is literally not a negative, doesn't mean shit to us. It synergizes so well with our Bloodied nature, it basically gives us an extra 50% damage on top of everything else, Nerd Rage, the Bloodied effect, all of that. So it's just amazing. Next up is Bird Bones. I definitely prefer to have this on because of the +4 to agility and the reduced fall speed. Definitely synergizes well with this build when you're jumping around in power armor and falling a little bit slower. You have more control in the air when you are shooting things with your explosive weapons. Moving on, we have Carnivore. Obviously this is amazing, just bonuses when you're eating raw meat and such, and it easily replenishes all your food and hunger, but feel free to use Herbivore if that's more your style. Additionally, we have Eagle Eyes. This one I was on the fence about, but 25% extra crit damage when we do hit criticals is definitely beneficial for this build when we're trying to min-max our damage output. The -4 to strength is counteracted by the mods on our legs for our power armor, so I'm not too worried about that strength. And the +4 to perception is nothing to pass up since we already have such low perception. Next up, we have Electrically Charged, chance to shock melee attackers. I find this just a little bit of a funny gimmick because we're so tanky, and just having things attack us get damaged by their own attacks because of this mutation is just really amusing to me. You don't need to have it, same as Unstable Isotope down there at the bottom. It basically does the same thing. They do damage us, but that damage is completely negated by all of our perks. All incoming damage is basically nothing. Next up is absolutely essential for any build, especially this one. Marsupial, your jump height and carry weight is increased by a fuckton. Basically, jump height is essential for this build's playstyle because we're using explosive weapons. What we want to do is jump up high and then spray the feet of anything that is in front of us. This will basically counteract any risk of killing ourselves with our explosive weapons, so yeah, definitely needed. Next up we have Plague Walker. I've mentioned many times that this should just be used on every build since it basically has no negatives. It just gives a little bit of area of effect damage to us when we happen to catch a disease, and you can't control when you catch a disease, so yeah, it might as well make it work to your benefit. Next up is Scaly Skin. The negative to AP here isn't really all too worrisome since we have so many +4s to agility, but basically the increased damage resistance and energy resistance is definitely beneficial to our tanky playstyle. Next up, we definitely want to take Speed Demon on top of all this for increased reload speed and movement speed. Since we're in power armor, we're slow, we're hunky, we're using heavy weapons that take forever to reload. It definitely helps counteract all that. So yes, these are all of the mutations I have chosen for this specific tanking, bloodied, explosive, heavy weapons power armor build. Feel free to change it around to your discretion, this is only what I recommend. Moving on to weapons, clearly this is a bloodied build, so that is what we will be using, specifically bloodied explosive weapons and bloodied faster fire rate weapons, as these weapons will give us the highest damage per shot and damage per second for every weapon that we use. As you can see here, I have everything ranged from bloodied explosive 50 cals, LMGs to Gatling plasmas, hell I even have a bloodied explosive flamethrower. And these are all amazing weapons, that when combined with this build can be used to deal some serious damage. And I will just quickly mention that for the newer players, all explosive energy weapons are legacy and can no longer be dropped in game. Therefore they are very rare and powerful. Although as we all know in situations like the Scorched Earth event, the Scorchbeast Queen will not be affected by most explosive forms of damage, so that is where I strongly recommend switching to our backup weapons. the weapons with the legendary effects Bloodied and 25% faster fire rate, specifically on things like the LMG and 50 cal. With those weapons and those legendary effects combined, they are very, very useful against the Scorch Beast Queen. And as you can see from all the footage in the background, these weapons absolutely devastate everything in your path. Armor wise, we obviously want to use Power Armor. This is because of the perk card Stabilized. If it didn't benefit Power Armor, I would say use this build without Power Armor, but we just can't pass up 45% armor penetration. Obviously, while in Power Armor, we basically do more damage with our heavy weapons because of that perk, to put it simply, but armor wise, if you're brand new to the game, just use whatever Power Armor you have at your disposal. I recommend using excavated Power Armor until you're able to get yourself a suit of either X01 Power Armor or T51B Power Armor. These two are probably the best endgame Power Armor suits, and a large majority of the player base will have them at their disposal. And the reason I say this is because the actual two best suits of Power Armor in Fallout 76 has to offer are locked behind an incredibly long grind. This is both the T65 Power Armor suit and the Strangler Heart Power Armor suit. The way I see it, they are both worth the grind. As you can see, I have both suits of armor, and from my extensive testing, I can say wholeheartedly that they both do have different uses. The T65 suit of Power Armor has the highest damage resistance in the game and will make you the tankiest possible, while the Strangleheart does not have the greatest of defense rating, but it is the only suit of Power Armor that directly increases your damage output. This suit of Power Armor adds a small poisonous damage over time effect to all of your weapons, which can be very effective. So in my opinion, just to summarize, use whatever Power Armor you can that you have at your disposal. Personally, I recommend the X01 for the moment, at least until you're able to get your hands on one of the two endgame Power Armor suits, that being either T65 or Strangleheart. And to put it simply, they are both amazing. One is just more geared for defense and the other is for offense. Additionally, for our Power Armor modifications, you are free to put as you choose on them, but I strongly recommend putting on the Emergency Protocols modification into the chest piece. This will help synergize with our Bloodied playstyle and literally will half all of incoming damage, making us so much more powerful. Now, alternate styles of play are obviously high health versions of this build, like I mentioned previously, but now I will go into detail for it. Basically, perk card wise, all we need to do is take out the Nerd Rage, and bam, that is 3 extra points that you can allocate wherever you choose. Nerd Rage is the only perk card that specifically adheres to the Bloodied playstyle. Also, the Adrenal Reaction mutation should not be used if you do not plan on using this build in its Bloodied form. Armor wise, the only change would be to take out the Emergency Protocols modification for the chest piece, and switch it for whatever you like. And lastly, obviously, if you don't plan on using this build for the Bloodied form, then don't use Bloodied weapons. Try to use Junkies or Vampire heavy weapons, as they will be a great substitute. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is Magnus the Devastator, my PvE min-maxed Bloodied Power Armor heavy weapons specialist. If you'd like to build this yourself, I have provided links to the build via the Nukes and Dragons website for your convenience. If you'd like to experiment with any other playstyles or builds, I have plenty to choose from, so feel free to check them out via the eye in the top right corner. And yeah guys, if this is your first time here and you enjoyed the content, then be sure to subscribe. We are on the march to 10,000 subscribers. As always, these are my channel supporters and harbingers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in a much larger way. I do appreciate it. We have 2 new ones, Evil Men and your arch enemy. So thank you guys so much for becoming harbingers. I really appreciate it. Links to my social media and Discord server is all linked down below. If any of you amazing people would like to join up, that would be greatly appreciated. But until next time, I've been Tyr, and welcome to Valhalla.